Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm Bethanne Patrick, your local moderator du jour for so many panels, and also a book critic who has managed to corral three of my colleagues, my esteemed colleagues, into this panel. And I hope we're going to give you some great information today. And I should note that although we're sponsored by the wonderful sponsors here, we are not sponsored by any book critics association. And I'm just going to make sure I mention that just for full disclosure. We are not here representing anyone. We are each a book critic who has a job or doesn't have a job or what have you. And so I wanted to make sure I just mentioned that so there'd be no misunderstanding. But first of all, I need to introduce my esteemed colleagues, and they are Ron Charles, Lisa Page, and Susan Coll. Thank you, the three of you, for being here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us all.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just give quick bios before we start with the questions, because there's so much to cover always. Ron Charles, you know him the best as a book critic at the Washington Post, or maybe you know him even better as the totally hip video book reviewer in his videos. They are indeed videos, and they are book reviews, and they're so much more than that as well, Ron. Susan Coll is the author of 5 novels, most recently The Stager, which was a New York Times and Chicago Tribune editor's choice. Her essays and book reviews have appeared in publications that include the New York Times, the Washington Post, Washingtonian, Moment, NPR.org, theatlantic.com, and The Millions. She is president of the Penn-Faulkner Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. And Lisa Page, who is co-editor of the anthology We Wear the Mask, 15 True Stories of Passing in America, that's out from Beacon Press, has work that's appeared in The Atlantic, The Crisis, VQR, American Short Fiction, Playboy, Playbill, Phoebe, the Washington Post Book World, and many other publications. She is assistant professor of English and directs the creative writing program at the George Washington University. She previously served as interim director of Africana Studies at GWU. She is also former president of the Penn-Faulkner Foundation and resident faculty member of the Yale Writers Workshop. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
And full disclosure, Susan is president of Penn-Faulkner. Lisa is on the board of Penn-Faulkner, as I am. I'm also first vice president and chair of the programs committee. So, you know, we're not sponsored by Penn-Faulkner either, but there's a lot of us here today. So, woohoo, yay, Penn-Faulkner Foundation. So we're going to, there's so many ways to start. And one way is to get something out of the way immediately, which is none of us reviews anything that is self-published at this juncture. That is not to say that self-published books are not worthy of review, but there's a reason we don't review self-published books, right, Ron?
Well, last year I got into an argument, a discussion with a guy at Publishers Weekly about this very subject, and I ended up promising publicly that I would review the winner of the Selfies Award, that is the best self-published book of the year. And they announced it a couple weeks ago, and it was a book called The Winter Sisters by Tim Westover, a historical novel, and I read it, and I thought it was pretty good, and I did review it, and you know, it proves the point that there are good self-published books out there. For us, as a relatively small book section, the problem is discoverability. We just have no way to deal with the several 100,000 titles that would come pouring in, so we do have a policy in general not to review self-published books, because we need that filtering system of getting an agent, getting an editor, getting a publisher that, you know, weeds out hundreds, thousands, millions of books so that we can look at already the way too many titles we have to review and choose from those. If you just opened it up to everyone who thought they had a book in them, we just would be paralyzed.
That's a very good point about discoverability. I agree with you. I can't imagine, because I do often get books sent to me just, you know, over the transom that are self-published. And as you said, some of them look really good, some of them are really good, but there's no way to be fair about it. And I think that's really, really difficult. Lisa, Susan, do either of you receive self-published books or have people asking you to look at them?
I will, at George Washington University, receive emails now and then from people wanting me to review their books. And I always say no for the same reasons that Ron has sort of explained. It's just not, it's also that it's sort of not ethical for me to do as professor at George Washington University to, I mean, then I can just start reviewing my friends too. There have to be boundaries up, right?
Right. And we will talk more about the boundaries. Susan, how about you?
Yeah, I'll just say this is very close to my heart because one of my day jobs is teaching writing, and I do these year-long novel year classes. And you know, one thing I've seen is we all know there's so much talent out there, and publishing is so hard, and there's so many really talented writers who can't break through. So I'm always advocating for the small press authors and self-published authors. But when it comes to reviews, you know, as you've all said, there's just so many books and there's so few book reviews already. It's hard enough even if you're being published by Random House just to get a book review. So it is a reality that no, I mean, I've never reviewed self-published books, but I also don't have the access to be doing quite as much reviewing. So.
Right. You know, I wanted to make sure we talked about it because I know that there are people out there who are maybe watching this either as registrants for the festival or on Facebook who have decided for excellent reasons to self-publish their books and are wondering how do we possibly get those books reviewed, because reviews, oh, well, dare I say, reviews make a difference?
Let me put some numbers behind that, what Susan said. We're getting 150 books a day. That's about 800 a week, and we review about 20 a week, and we're one of the bigger book sections. So 20 books out of 800 a week, which means we're essentially not reviewing almost all the books. So, I mean, and Susan's right. I mean, you can get published by Random House, FSG, Knopf, anybody. You can be famous. You can have all your other books reviewed, and you're still very likely not to get reviewed by one of the big book review sections. They're just, the volume is overwhelming.
That's true. Susan, Lisa, anything about volume from you?
Not for me, actually, no. I'm not seeing all the books that come in like Ron does.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I can just speak from my days working at a bookstore that was also heartbreaking to go into the galley room and see all of these really exciting, promising new books, and not all of them even wind up on the shelves of a bookstore. So the good news is there's a lot being published, or was. I don't know about pandemic this moment, but you know, the bad news is it's a little harder to get visibility for all of these books.
You know, I think this is a point that cannot be overstressed because, for example, in my current, well, I'm completely freelance, and currently with all of the reviewing that I do, I'm able to cover between 20 and 25 books a month because, and those, it's not because several of those things are columns, like my column for the Post where I have 10 books. So, you know, mash them all together, and that is as much as one reviewer can do. I don't know anyone who's individually reviewing more than 25 books a month. It's awfully, and that, you know, takes a lot out of me, and it takes away from, you know, other work and other things. I'm not complaining. I love doing it, but there aren't, you know, there are people like you, Ron, who have a newsletter to put together, and you cover in very, very careful detail one book a week. So that's four a month. We just can't possibly cover everything out there. And with me and Ron, we're only talking about fiction. We're not even dipping into the world of nonfiction. So it is very tough. But how do we decide what to review? We have a newspaper critic, an academic, a novelist, and then me, mishmash that I am. How do we go about discovering things? How do we go about choosing things? Some of us get assignments, others, choose for certain venues and certain publications. So let's talk about that.
Well, I can say my answer is easy because I only review what I'm assigned. So
Okay.
I'm not on the selecting end.
And likewise for me too. I only review the books that I'm assigned. I've pitched a story here and there once in a while, but frankly, they're all assignments.
I am selecting my own books largely now, and it always comes down to, is this a book that I think I can say something interesting about? I mean, it's all audience driven. I mean, it's not, will I like this book? That's the last thing on my mind. But is this a book that I can entertain an audience writing about? And sometimes that means I don't do books because I've already done several of those books, like academic novels, for instance. If I've already reviewed 3 academic novels in the year, I've already used up all my jokes about academic novels. I have nothing more to say.
Well, it's very important you have enough jokes, Ron. I know
Exactly.
that.
And there are even authors like that too, who are just so prolific that you don't have anything more to say about her.
Or anything more to say about a certain subject, or so.
And it's not that subject's not, or that author isn't worthy. It's just that somebody else should talk about that now because I've done, and somebody else will have a more interesting perspective than me. So I would pass over it for that reason.
I think that segues really well into, we have so many things to talk about the way book reviewing was and the way book reviewing is. But let's talk a little bit about the way book reviewing should be, and allowing other people and other voices to take over. There you go, Ron, you get to be the rooster in the hen house and the white man in the middle of everything. But publishing is changing. We know that. Look at the front cover of the New York Times, 4 women and 2 women of color. Come on, Lisa and Dana. Well, I'm gonna get a t-shirt that says Lisa and Dana and Reagan and why? Come on, why Amy and Amy? I'm trying to come up with the fourth name, but that was such a cool moment to see 4 women plus 2 women of color being appointed to these positions in publishing. And we need that in reviewing as well. And of course, Lisa, as you know, in the academy, Ron in the media industry, et cetera. We need to see this difference in perspective, this diversity. And I don't think we've seen it fully in book reviewing so far, have we?
Well, there's also that controversy with the National Book Critics Circle board of directors, that so many of them resigned in this controversy over diversity, right? I mean, one of them didn't feel that the organization needed to tweak anything. It didn't need to worry about racism in publishing. And then several other board members disagreed and ultimately resigned. So
exactly.
I think there's a lot of action in the area of bringing diversity into reviewing.
I really hope so. One of the things I did in my short tenure on that board before all of this occurred was to establish an emerging critics sort of program. It's actually called the Alan Shoes Emerging Critics Scholarship because he's one of our own in DC and beloved. But what was so exciting about that was to see that the people who were applying for it and who were being selected were younger, were Black, were genderqueer, were people who came from different countries or spoke different languages other than English to begin with. And it really did seem, I think, once the National Book Critics Circle is over this considerable hump, that perhaps we will see a lot more change, because it's no good having people of just one path in life review all of these wonderful new stories and ways of telling stories that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Anyone want to pick up on that, or?
I guess
Yeah,
I
no,
would.
yeah.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Susan.
Ron, you go.
No, go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say, because I'm just really, I'm not in the rooms where reviewing decisions are made, but I would just say it seems like it needs to start high. It needs to start where we've just begun with these big changes in publishing and what's being published and who's making these decisions. So.
That's a really, really good point. Ron, go ahead. I know you had something.
I'm no longer editor of Book World, but when I was, I found it really hard until I began to count. And I know that sounds terrible to some people, but until you have actual data, you just overestimate how good you are at these sort of diversity issues. You need actual data. And even beyond that, I found the best thing that I did was to appoint monthly columnists who were women or who were Black, so that we had those voices in the regular mix, just built in, because your good intentions, I found, just kind of fade away over time. You really need to make structural changes in the way you're doing things.
I think that's really important. In fact, I am not going to quote them because I don't have them right in front of me, but we did do the data dance with our panelists for this festival. And I'm so glad to say that we did some really good work. We have something like, let's say 90, 97 women panelists and 60 men, for example. That's one great, structural change that we were able to put in. We had far more writers of color than we had last year for the first festival. And it does, as Susan said, need to come from high up, but maybe from the grassroots too. Maybe that will help us meet in the middle on something a little more equitable. But all of us are at a point of, how shall I put it, experience in our careers. So how has book reviewing changed? Let's talk about that over the years that each of us has been reviewing books, looking at literature, teaching, writing, etc. Stump the panel.
Well, I guess it would help me, Bethanne, if you talk a little bit about how you think it's changed.
Well, here's one thing that is really astounding me, and I think I've talked about this on another panel or something, but when I really got into this world of publishing and reviewing and author interviewing, I thought I was going full steam into the digital side of things. My first big job was at AOL. I thought I was just going to keep working on websites and, hyperlinked book reviews. Oh yeah, that's that's a blast from the past. And here I find myself doing the most writing for print publications. Yes, the reviews also appear online, but I'm writing for the Washington Post, I'm writing for the LA Times, I'm writing for Time Magazine, all of these venerable media brands that still have print publications. So that's something that is really interesting to me. And I didn't think that it would happen. I didn't think there would be enough coverage still going on in print to do that. Now, again, not complaining, very happy where I am, but I am surprised that digital book reviews haven't taken off more. And I wonder, Ron, if it's the discoverability issue again, that people simply don't really know what to search for. And so they go straight to something like Amazon. Maybe they know the millions. There's a lot of publications that they don't know and they don't know how to find, but they do know how to find some of the bigger, some of the bigger brands.
I think technology is the biggest revolution in book reviewing in the last 25 years. That would encompass Amazon and Goodreads and the tremendous democratization of book reviewing. I mean, think of how many more, really millions of people review books. Most of them are amateurs, but I'm surprised when I go on Goodreads how often I find long, interesting, reviews written by people that, you know, had just did it on their own time for no money. It's kind of amazing. And they're all over the place now.
Why does anyone pay us?
Yeah.
But it's true.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot that can be found. Go ahead.
yeah, no, that's I think exactly right what Ron just said about the democratization of it. But then the answer, why would anybody pay us, is because as thoughtful as some of those are, there's also the complete opposite. There's the really kind of thoughtless and troll-like reviews out there that you can get of just people who will give a book 1 star or no stars because the shipment was late on the book, or
Right.
they didn't like the price. And also I find that the more voices there are out there, the more I actually depend on critics like Ron, or, you know, other go-to voices that you know how to assess what they're saying. I feel like I've been reading Ron's reviews for so many years now that I understand his sensibility, and, you know, I trust what he has to say. So it makes you need those voices even more, I think.
Lisa, anything to say about that trust?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm also turning to Ron, but also turning, sorry, to the New York Times book review.
I've got to get a copy of this. Everyone's talking about it.
New publication, those crazy kids.
Right. I mean, I think those go-tos are really important. But you make me think too, Bethanne, about technology and the moment we're in right now. And that is that we're all on screens all the time, and we were before COVID-19, but now in this moment, especially, we're on our screens. And so to pick up a print edition of anything, for me, it feels luxurious. I sit down, I relax. It's something I look forward to. So that tends to be where I'm looking from the book reviews I want to read.
Oh, really interesting. I like that idea of it being a luxury. Of course, that also means when something is a luxury that you don't have to have it. And I want book reviews to be essential, but oh well, we can't have everything. Now, we talked about, Ron, what piques your interest and what you know, how you are sort of audience driven in what you choose to review right now. Is there anything that immediately sends your antennae up? Like, is it a comic novel? I know, for example, you loved Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Really loved that book. So do you look for things like that? Do you look for something, you know, darker? What's your taste?
Yeah, I knowing that we have this broad audience of people, I try to be, I mean, I'm sure I'm not, but I try to have my interest as wide as possible and make sure I'm not just reading a certain kind of book. So I do like comic novels, but I do find them relatively rare. I do a lot of historical novels. I do contemporary fiction. I try to keep myself as broad as possible, but I don't get to romance, sci-fi, westerns. I mean, there are whole genres I know I'm missing, but we do have columns that try and hit those things. So I would say, given my particular situation, I want to review literary fiction as broadly as possible.
Okay. It's really tough. It's, as we started out talking about self-published books, and just when I try to put together each month's column of 10 hot reads or whatever, you know, you want to call them, Bethanne's picks, that is a tremendous challenge. Because again, I'm trying to be broad. I am trying to get something on there for as many people as possible, balance nonfiction with fiction. But I had this great situation come up a month or two ago, and I must have been May, because I believe there was a book by, what's his name, from Fox about Hiroshima. Chris, I can't remember. This is, just a function of age, not a function of not wanting to say anyone's name. Sorry about that. But the month before that, I'd gotten a whole bunch of comments. And why do I read the comments? But I do. There aren't that many on books, book stuff anyway. But everyone said, men read too. Why is this all about women's fiction? Everything. So the next month I thought, okay, I'll put a couple of books that I know will really appeal to men. And one of them was this book, and it happens to be by a Fox News reporter. And so I get one comment that says, well, I don't care about the other 9 books on this list, but I really, really like this Fox News reporter's book. And then the next comment says, why would you put that book by that Fox News hack on here? I'm never reading this again. And I'm thinking, there is no way to please everyone when you are editing, writing, curating book reviews. There's just no way. Why do we do this? Why? There's my next question for you.
Women do read most of the fiction in this country. That's not untrue.
Right.
Yeah, I was told that once when I had a book jacket that I didn't really like. I said, no man will ever pick up this book. And my editor said, men don't read books, or they read whatever the woman that they live with is reading. So don't worry about it. But I know that's not really true, but that is a perception, or maybe it is true.
Kind of true.
Well, actually, I talked about this in an earlier panel today. My husband, who I always talk about online as Mr. Bethanne, didn't read fiction at all. All the books in his shelf, history, military this, and, all this kind of thing. And then he started listening to audiobooks. And in the past 2 or 3 years, not only has he gone from reading 5 books a year to reading closer to 50, but he is listening to so much fiction. And so we're on a walk a couple of days ago, and he said, so have you ever read this book called Station 11 by Emily? I don't know what her name is. Yes, I've read Station 11. And we started talking about it. It was a great conversation. And I thought, maybe this is the secret, Ron and Susan, maybe this is a secret to, just put things on audio books, and they're not looking at the cover, Susan. They're not seeing anything look feminine or, something, but, he's been reading everything from, you talked about The Winter Sisters, a self-published novel, but isn't there another novel called The Winter Sisters, Ron?
I know the title sounds very familiar.
Robin Oliveira, something like that. But I mean, he's been reading historical fiction, the kind of big, lush historical novels that are supposed to be read only by women. And he loves them.
Well, he's part of a huge trend. I mean, audiobook publishing is the big standout success of the last decade. The sales have been rising, I think, double digits every year for the last 9 years. It's an amazing transformation.
It is an amazing transformation. And here's a question. I do know a few bloggers, excuse me, and bookstagrammers who review audiobooks separately, because they do talk to their readers about things like voices and intonation and, all that, and, the acting and characterization that can go on in a good audiobook. Do you all think that audiobooks should be reviewed separately from the print edition, or should we wrap it all together?
It's an interesting question. I'm still, the wrapping them all together. I'm very old school.
Mm-hmm.
To set up a separate audio book pulls in acting, pulls in, criticism around performance,
Right.
apart from the written word. So
that's a really good point. Yes. And I don't think, that isn't something, there's some book reviewers and critics who can discuss other kinds of performance and arts, but some of us can't. I would not trust myself to talk about performance. So I think that's an excellent point. Now, speaking about book reviews and what should be in them or not, what are the hallmarks of a good book review, regardless of length? I think there are a lot of people who, and maybe even I, don't know what is actually a good book review. But what do we think as people who are writing them that, helps readers, helps our audience?
Well, I'll jump in and backtrack to an earlier question that I was excited about answering, and we moved on, and I'll segue to this answer. You asked, why do we review books? And I would say, of everything I do, I find being asked to write a book review is the greatest honor. And really, if I could restart my career, I think I would have gone more in that direction. Whenever I'm asked to do a review, I get very excited. The book arrives, at least in the galley pre-COVID, and I stare at it. I really feel it's such an honor to be asked my opinion on a book, because I love to read and always have. And what makes a good book review? I think I'm looking for opinion on the book. I don't want.
Is my audio still working?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my headphones just died. Can you hear me?
Can.
Okay. The kind of book reviews I don't like are ones that don't tell me anything about the book other than a summary of the book. I don't need the summary. I really want thoughtful opinion on why the book is working, and if it happens to be relevant, or there's something about the author that makes it relevant, I want those details. But that's a fairly simplified answer.
I think that's important. I have something to say about it, but I'll let Lisa and Ron weigh in first.
Well, I'm very much like you, Susan. I also am very honored when I get an assignment. It's very exciting to get it in the mail. It's very exciting to put together what I want to say, reading it, looking into the writer's background, sort of researching them as I put it together. It's always a gift. It's always something that expands my sense of the contemporary literary world. So it means a lot to do it. I always feel like I get an opportunity to learn something and to grow myself.
As someone who has edited both Lisa and Susan, I can say that that's why we assign to them, because they are gracious, intelligent, humane reviewers, and that's what we want.
Oh, Ron.
No, it's true. I do it as a job, so there is the risk of it becoming a chore, but it's never a chore. Honestly, it is never a chore.
Well, that I have to say, that's really true. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and what I want to do is highlight what's best about this particular book so that it can find its audience. I want to place the book in some sort of larger literary and social and political context so you can understand its cultural position. And I want to entertain and engage the readers of the Washington Post. Those are the three things. I want to find out what this author tried to do and then judge how well did she do it.
Well, now, as one of the Washington Post reviewers who is not gracious and intelligent over on this side.
So not true and sort of unfair.
I'm teasing. But I will say, one of the things that has gotten more and more important to me over the years, and as I've, grown as a reviewer, and really not that I ever wrote something that wasn't worth reading at all, but I do know my reviews have gotten better since I started considering all of those things you say, Ron. How does this fit in the present moment? Instead of just considering it in its context, what's the, I'm thinking of an old literary criticism book that we all read as undergraduates. I'm thinking, in the whole Northrop Frye era, you're considering, the work of literature as itself.
New criticism, basically.
Yeah, I'm just not interested in that anymore. I'm interested in, what a book can help readers understand about the world we live in. Right. And the more it has to say about that, and, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a book set in the present moment, of course.
Oh, no.
No, we could, that's a whole other tangent we could go off on. And I know we're going to wind up with some questions, so I want to make sure I finish asking mine. But in this present moment we have here, we've all been isolated. we've all been at home. We're not getting all the packages in the mail. And look, Ron's getting more. One or two of you might have seen a little piece I wrote last week for Publishers Weekly about e-galleys.
Yeah.
And I took the position and still take the position that I am really happy to see them, read them, and use them because of what's going on right now. I know it's been something, this is, when I say it's a bone of contention, it's pretty low stakes in book reviewing. But, you know, I know, for example, Ron, you prefer to read paper books.
Oh, dramatically, because I can't take notes on those galleys, of the e-books. You know,
You
I don't know what
can, Ron, you can.
it's really cumbersome, and I've just been doing it too long. I can't change. Bethanne, don't make me change.
Susan, Lisa, do you read digital galleys and that sort of thing?
No, I don't. Susan, you go ahead.
I don't read digital galleys, although I would. I just haven't had any sent to me recently that I opened up. But when when quarantine began, I was actually someplace rural where it was taking me a long time to get mail. And I started reading on my iPad a lot of ebooks. I know the world divided into people who couldn't read anything and who just read voraciously. And the first few weeks, I just read, and being able to get those books instantly, even though I'm really old school, I love books. Even when I read an ebook, I still often buy the physical book just because I need to have it to look at to remember that I'd read it. But the actual reading experience I found much better than I would have thought. And it was just such a guilty pleasure to think, oh yeah, I've always wanted to read, you know, In the Dream House, which actually Lisa's mentioned many times. So it was your recommendation. And there I had it in, 1 minute, I had it and read it. So there is a real place for ebooks.
Oh, what an amazing book In the Dream House is. I wish we could just stay on for a couple of hours and just talk about our favorites, but I want to talk about something that is one of my treats every month or every couple of weeks with my e-reader, and that is Nicholas Latimer's Knopf Pantheon email with all the links to the NetGalley titles. I don't know if you can see that. So last week I got to download Transcendent Kingdom, the new Yaja C, the new Mary Gordon Payback, Hari Kunzru's Red Pill, the new Carl Hyacin, the new Vanessa Veselka, all of these books just on this little phone, and they're all there. And so that's one of my big treats in isolation as a book reviewer, is to get those long emails from Knopf with all the amazing, novels that they're publishing. So, it may change. I've noticed the trickle has begun again. The packages are coming over the doorstep again. So, but it is really difficult. I find the e-galleys are wonderful for highlighting passages and keeping track of passages that I want to note and go back to, Ron, but it isn't as easy to take notes. That is very true. Very, very true. So one of the things you brought up, and we talked about for a couple of minutes there, is the role of book reviewing in the larger cultural conversation. So I believe that. Ron, I know you do. It's Susan and Lisa, it sounds like you do as well. But do book reviews, do they have to have a certain tone? There are reviews out there that are very long. There are reviews out there that are very academic. There are some reviews that, really wrestle with the text. There are some reviews that, they're all different kinds of ways to write a good book review. What makes a review something that is worthy of standing up alongside literature? And I'm sure we can all think of a few people who have the ability to write like that. Anyone from, I don't know, Joe Queenan to James Wood to, let's get some women's names in there who write, really good reviews too. Stump the panel again.
Stu Halpern in the
Okay.
New York Review of Books. And I mean, there's, you know, I guess the easy answer is there's so many different formats for book reviews, but it kind of depends what you're looking for. I mean, I find, for instance, Bethanne, your monthly, you know, what books to look out for, and the New York Times version of that, I find those both very helpful. Just a quick glance at what I am not aware is coming
The
out.
New York Times has a version of that?
You know, I find the New Yorker briefs just interesting to see what they select, and all of those just give you a snippet of what's coming out. Then there's the next, you know, layer of that, which is the longer reviews that you do, that Ron does, that Lisa does, that give you a taste of that book in this moment. And then, you know, I'm grateful that we still in this world have reviews like the New York Review of Books, because then you get the much longer, more thoughtful kind of deep dive into an author's career and or how it fits into this political moment. And, you know, so there could be much more. And I think, you know, to the issue of grassroots getting more voices in the mix, for sure, that's a good thing, much needed thing. But so we could use more and more diversity in every sense of the word in the range of book reviewing and what's being reviewed. But at least there is what there is, for starters. And I'm glad that there is that range.
That is a really, really good point. I think we've answered, you know, why some of us get stuck on book reviews, why some of us don't move on to become, you know, cultural critics of other types of media and, you know, to writing different kinds of cultural criticism. I think some of us are just bookish, and that's the way it's going to be. But I am wondering what we're each really looking forward to. What, you know, is it possible, Ron, for you to talk about some books you're excited about without ruining any future reviews?
Oh, but not because I'm being coy. I just don't know. I tend to review my books right up against publication date because I'm always behind. So I don't honestly pay that much attention to what's coming up. I've got my list, and somebody keeps track of it for me, and I just look at the list and read the next book. Susan's, I assume there are some writers watching this who want to write book reviews, and Susan's point is the central one, that when you write a review, you need to start with who your audience is and what the format is. There is no platonic review in the air that is perfect. It depends on who you're writing for, and you've got to think about how that affects form and tone and content, and it affects everything. And the reviews we get that don't work are reviews from people that, you know, seriously did not read the Washington Post, that have no idea what, you know, city and suburban newspaper readers want to read. They have some, either the tone's not right, or it's too casual, or it's too formal and academic. And you've got to write each piece. This is what Lisa and Susan tell their students all the time. I'm sure you've got to write the piece for the audience that you intended for. You can't just write it for what you want. I don't know why I got all that.
Yeah.
I wish.
By the end, I was very passionate about it, though.
A few years ago, I turned in a review to a fairly new editor for me of, you know, a book I thought I had a lot to say about, but it was for a completely different, but also suburban newspaper. And, you know, my incredibly snarky introduction with all kinds of weird little cultural reference in it was completely wrong for that editor. And I hadn't read the newspaper before. I mean, mistakes, they have been made. But you know, that is really true. And I thought, oh, why did I waste his time and my time? Why didn't, you know? So I think that's a really important thing for anyone who wants to write reviews. And also, this is something I didn't know 25 years ago when I first started writing reviews occasionally, is I didn't know what I was doing it for. I was just, you know, I mean, honestly, the big bucks, that's why.
The money and the power.
I want to make sure we have 15 minutes left, and I do see we have a couple of questions. I want to make sure you all know that if you do have questions, please type them in and we will absolutely answer them. I will throw them out to everyone over here. First question from Janine is the audiobook explosion affecting nonfiction as well? My answer would be absolutely. I think that I know so many people who have been listening to big, fat, biographies and histories in audiobook. And in fact, some of my friends, it seems to be their preferred way for reading something, whether, it's the new Grant biography or, some kind of heavy political history. So I agree. That it is affecting nonfiction as well. Anyone else?
The sales drive more money, which allows publishers to spend more on these productions, and so they're just much, much better. I mean, if you're listening to an audiobook of a musician, you're very likely to get clips of the music now, for instance, and that costs money and takes time, and all that is affecting a nonfiction audiobook production.
That's interesting because also if an author or a publisher has paid a lot of money for photo rights, what do you do with those? Do those come to you in a link with the audiobook? I don't know. I have no idea. Lisa, Susan?
I don't have any idea either, but you just made me think about teaching, and sometimes I will have to turn to an ebook because I've forgotten my hard copy, and that can be a problem. For instance, I was teaching Margot Jefferson's Negro Land, which is a memoir, and her book does not have a table of contents. The ebook does have a table of contents.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I'm telling my students, oh, go to chapter blah blah from my office, and they're like no. So, there isn't always consistency between them, which is interesting.
That's very interesting.
That is true.
We have a question from Addie Lingle who says, I find book reviews to be helpful because it gives a non-marketing spin on versus all that comes out of the promotion machine. We hope. How do you work not to be swayed by the hype of a particular book or author? I think that's a terrific question that speaks to some of the things, we are concerned with regarding ethics as reviewers.
Well, one thing I do when I am given a book to review is I never read the advance reviews until I've finished writing the review, because I don't want to be influenced in any way. I even try to avoid reading any of the literature that comes with the book from the publisher. So again, I probably take it like too seriously, but I really am so honored to be doing this that I try to be very ethical about it. If it's a really big book and it is really hyped, I don't know, I just still try to, it gives me no pleasure to not be a generous book reviewer, and I know what goes into writing a book, so I'm not really looking to ever take anyone down, but I have every once in a while, the last review I did that was not really positive was a very big name, and it was a hyped book just because of who it was, and I felt like that book had been so rushed and was so full of mistakes even that an editor hadn't really bothered to weigh in on that book. So, I wasn't afraid to point those out.
Yep. And as you said, it's not, it's partly the ethics, but also I admire when people do not read all of that advanced copy, because you're bringing such a fresh set of eyes to the book. Instead of saying, oh gosh, okay, I'll look for the big twist towards the end. You are saying, I will meet this book where it is. And I do think that's very important.
And sometimes as a reviewer, I love that Susan brings that up about the promotional materials, because sometimes you'll find that the real heart of the story isn't in those promotional materials. So, it's a good plan to ignore them.
That's a great point, Lisa. And Ron, that makes me think so much of your reviews, that you don't necessarily hit on the expected high points or low points.
Thank you. I don't read any other reviews, but I do read advanced reviews because that's the only way I can pick it's the only way I can pick the books to review.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with Susan, and I go beyond that and say that I am almost instantly contaminated when I read somebody else's opinion. So I really try not to do it. I mean, I try really hard not to do it. So once I picked a book, I stop reading about it. I don't, and if I'm late with my review and I know, the Times and the LA Times have already come out with their reviews, it's very tempting. But boy, the minute you read those others, you get intimidated. You find their phrases and everything creeping into your own copy. You really need to stay away from all that stuff.
But I will go at the end of it when my review is in the paper, and then I'll go and look at other people's reviews.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's always fun. That is always fun. So
or agonizing.
Oh, but there is something, there's something fun about this, and there's something that's kind of a sport in a way, because I'm so interested to see the different range of opinions on a book. And I also find it interesting sometimes to see what Publishers Weekly and Kirkus had to say about a book, and then to see how the book was received in the world. And it always, I enjoy when the book succeeds despite bad pre-pub reviews, or the reverse happens, that those are no guarantees of its success in the world. So if there were betting on books, I would be up at the window losing my money.
Oh man, if only we could do that like we do in England on the Booker.
Right.
We also have a question from Kira, who says, how does an online book reviewer of genre fiction at semi-reputable places, break into these print publications? And of course, that is, always a question. We always need fresh voices. Don't come after my columns. Thank you very much. but that's a good question also, because it's specifically about genre fiction. And Ron, I think we could start with you, because you did, when you were editor of Book World, make a point of coming up with these columns. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how genre critics can, find their footing.
The best pitches you can make at the Post, and I think elsewhere too, is to be very specific about your interests. And I know that goes against your instincts, because you think, well, I'll tell them I can review anything, and then they'll ask me. We don't remember you if you can review anything. We remember you if you have
talking about my pitches.
No. We remember you if you have a very specific area of expertise and interest, because then when we get a book, and we will, about that, we'll think, oh yeah, somebody pitched us that. And also, to get way back to the diversity issue, I mean, part of it is the fact that white guys just pitch themselves much more aggressively than women or people of color, much more. And I know you're going to imagine that editors, are not influenced by that, but we are. I mean, we just get worn down. The email is just a fire hose, and you women and you people of color, just be more aggressive, be more out there, and pitch editors more.
I think that's a very important point. Kira, I want to speak to you directly, because your name indicates that you may be a woman or femme. And I think Ron is correct. I've recently broken in with a new editor. I won't name names of that editor, but I have been relentless. I have been more like a guy than I've ever been before. Hey, always polite like a woman, but also, much more confident about the fact that, I deserve an answer. Right. And here's
do be polite, but do be relentless. And sorry, Bethanne, but no means no, but silence doesn't mean anything. Okay, it doesn't mean anything.
Yes. We have another question. Anonymous attendee, how do you feel when you are critical of a book, but it becomes by a best-selling author, and it becomes loved by readers, do you, let me see it, do you go, I'm trying to go all the way down and it seems to have disappeared. Where did you go? Where did you go, anonymous attendee? So the question there, what do you go back and revise your original opinion when you're critical of a book, but it becomes a best-selling success? That's the question.
Well, I never did. And there is, and I will, this author will remain nameless, very, very popular writer. And I did not like her book. And I said why I didn't like her book. I had personal friends calling me up, furious with me because they loved this writer so much. But I just had to I had to say what I thought. You know, I had to be honest about it. So I did not get swayed by her popularity. I'm happy everybody else enjoys her. I do not. So
there we go. Susan, how about you?
Well, as Lisa said, that's why we need book critics, and there's no consensus on any book out there. You could have the most, Dan Brown is a huge best-selling author, and I think a lot of critics would, not necessarily, well, I don't mean to get myself in trouble there, but, there are a lot of really successful authors that are popular for their storytelling perhaps, but not for the writing. I mean, there's different ways to assess a book is what I'm trying to say. And there's never going to be any book that everybody in the world thinks is great or thinks is awful. So that's why we need voices.
Anonymous, I'm going to give you a great example of something that when Ron was my editor happened. I, again, will not mention the book or the author or anyone, but I did a real takedown of a novel I did not care for at all. It was by someone very well known, and the author actually called up Ron Charles and said, "How dare you? Who is this person that you allowed to write this screed?" And, he called me and said, "Do you have any conflict of interest with this person?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, "That's all I need to hear." And boom, that was it. Someone can get really angry, but if it is your honest opinion and you don't go back on it, you don't look back. You say, this is really how the book and I met at this moment in time, because we all also know that books change. That book's never going to change for me. But books do change when you read them over time. We've got a couple more questions, and I want to make sure we can get in as many as possible. We only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to go to Eileen Ferris, who says, Ron has done reviews with his wife in the form of skits. Oh, we know. Has anyone else tried something like this creative format? Not that I know of.
No. I remember when you started that whole thing, Ron, and I remember the reception you got, and it was the most original, fantastic mode of book reviewing.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Yes. And Dawn has only added to it. So I think that it really is. It's like, who was George Burns and Say Goodnight, Gracie. It's like you guys are a comedy duo for the ages. Addie Lingle, we do have a couple more minutes, wanted to ask, can you talk more about your process? Preferred time of day to read, preferred place? Do you start writing at all before you finish the book and prep, or does it all come out after the fact? And so, Ron, I'm not trying to walk over your chance to talk about the Totally Hip video book reviews.
No, I don't want to talk about that.
But there's so much in that question, and I wanted to, allow any of you to answer that we could. And then we can, if we've got another minute, talk more about the Totally Hip video book reviews. Does anyone have a process?
I just read as if I'm reading a book for pleasure, but with a pen in hand, and I'm underlining and making a mess of the galley and writing notes in the margins, and then I just sit and agonize and it slowly comes together. So that's not much of a, I don't have a process other than that, such as it is.
Agony. That's perfect.
Lisa, how about you?
It's the same thing. It's for me. It's the joy is the reading part, and then the writing is the hard part, obviously. But I've been working on one all day today, as a matter of fact, and it is. And I also know I want to teach this book, so
Wow.
it's been a really nice surprise.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, that's not really about process, but it is. It's a nice thing. It was a real nice surprise today.
Ron, I know that you usually devote a day to writing your week's review.
Right. Yeah. And it's a hard day. I mean, it is, like Susan said, it is agony. I want to make another point
Please.
from a previous question, because I know there are some reviewers out there or people that want to become reviewers. It's okay to criticize a book harshly if you want to, but do not criticize the fans of that book. Do not mock the fans of that genre.
Yeah.
We always take that stuff out. It always sounds petty and superior and snobby. I mean, so you don't like romance books? Well, then don't review them. But don't go after the fans of romance novels. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Very good point. I know it's 5 p.m. I know we could go on. I know we could probably have some more questions as well, but we probably have another panel starting. So I'm going to see Katie. Are we right up against it?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Close.
So I just want to say, Ron Charles, Lisa Page, Susan Coll, thank you all three, my esteemed colleagues and my friends too, for being here today. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure as always.
This is great fun. Great
Thank
fun.
you. Thank you so much.
So good to
I'm
see you
honored
guys.
to be with all of you. Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who's been here with us.
It's the biggest social event I've had in 3 months.
Yes. Except the roof, right?
Yeah.
The roof
With
fix.
the roofer.
That's right. Thank you so much, Bethanne.
Thanks. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Katie, I'll wait